All right. We are probably already live because Zoom usually goes straight over. Let's move that over, directing to YouTube. And oh, that's right. I'm going to have to turn this down. Yep. All right. Well, here we are, folks. And I am going to have to pop over to Facebook here for just a second and let followers over on Facebook know that we have moved over to YouTube. And that is because for some reason, Facebook is not recognizing uh, Zoom's match into that. And so let me put a quick little post in here for the folks that are on Facebook. We have the live to YouTube as Zoom wasn't connecting to Facebook. And let me see if I can do this. Copy. And we will put the link in. All right. Well, I am sorry to see that we are kind of going down this route as far as kind of starting the day out off channel. You know what I mean? Kind of off kilter. But let's go another measurement and let's talk about some of the good things, some of the great things that are going on right now. If we were to take a look at the news right now, ABC, NBC, CBS, things like that, we'd be hearing about refrigerator trucks full of bodies and dead folks and things like that. Or we could hop on some of our community social media pages and we could look for positive things, like helping old folks get a gallon of milk, cutting your neighbor's lawn because the lawn service isn't showing up. Gosh, just trying to think of things. You see a neighbor with cobwebs growing on their car, right? And the tires are deflating and you've got a compressor at your house. Why not take a moment and air up the tires on your neighbor's car and maybe have an excuse to get some of those cobwebs off the wheel. You know what I'm saying? This has been a really interesting time to watch families walk through the park together. I've never seen so many happy dogs. I just said that in a podcast interview a week or 10 days ago. The podcast got released today, and it was with a guy named Kenny Ballantyne. Great guy, really good at running the interview. And I really liked the way he led the interview. I liked the way he asked questions. He allowed the conversation to flow. He employed a lot of leadership techniques that were pretty admirable. But during that interview process, I said, my wife and I had gone to the park and we've seen families. And although people aren't supposed to interact, cross family, it's interesting that, to see the family units. Like I see people in my neighborhood. I'm like, I don't even know who that dude is. I've never seen that guy before. And that's because they're home, right? And there's just a lot of positive things that can come out of this whole thing. I want to encourage you. Some of what I see happen on YouTube and Zoom is there's just not interaction sometimes. If you sign into this and you've got a comment or you want to say something, this being broadcast on YouTube is cool because YouTube has a chat function and I can see the chat where I'm at. In fact, if you look to the right of your screen, you can see that there'll be a chat button there, right? So I'm going to put in a chat right there. It'll say, hello, everyone. And make sure that works. You can put in up to 200 characters and you can put in a question, a comment, something like that, help guide the conversation. That would be a lot of fun. And if you choose to join the Zoom conversation, you can go back to the academy at mañananomas.com and you'll see that the Zoom invite there will have the link to sign in, or the Mañana No Mas Facebook page under events has the Zoom credentials you need to sign into Zoom. And if you sign into Zoom, I've got that up on another screen and I can see your interaction here and see what you're all about, right? So we've got a few things going on there. Here we are, Leadershift. We're talking about the book by John Maxwell, Leadershift. This is the 8th session. If you're just joining us now, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I need to sign out because I don't know anything that's going on. No, that's not the case. In fact, today's a really rainy, gloomy day here in Southern California. And it's the kind of day where you just want to make a hot cup of tea and, full of whiskey or something. I mean, it's just that kind of just a kind of a cold, wet day, right? And I wasn't feeling all that motivated. I really just wanted to take a nap. And then I thought, you know what? Nah. The 3 o'clock show is coming up. I got to get out there and do this thing. And then I find myself getting excited. I find myself like kind of getting to the point where I enjoy pouring myself into this and making this happen. And I hope that you get this kind of reaction, right? I hope you get this kind of a benefit of feeling like someone wants to add value to you. Because I know that when people choose to add value to me, it makes me feel more valuable. It makes me feel like there's a connection. And coincidentally, that is what this session will be about. It's called Directing to Connecting. And what I'm talking about there is, that connection, that somebody's willing to make an investment in you. The things that we've already talked about, and I'm going to make this a shorter recap than usual because it's already 8 minutes after the hour. The very first session we talked about was why every leader needs to consider leadership. Then we talked about soloist to conductor. That was session 2. And that's from, making yourself the expert to being the leader of other experts, right? And then there was goals to growth. Goals to growth to me is powerful because it matches one of the courses I teach in the Mañana No Más Academy. And that is, it's one thing to chase a task. It's another thing to go for overall personal growth, in which those types of tasks become common, right? So goals to growth. There's another one that we did called perks to price. That was the 4th session. And in perks to price, we said there were certain perks to leadership and how some leaders might have the ambition to be a leader because of the perks that might come with that leadership, right? Rather than what's the price, what's the sacrifice that it takes to be a good leader in order to get those perks as kind of the icing on the cake, right? Kind of a motivation question there. Let's see if that's anyone that's lost. Nope, we're good. We're good so far. Chapter 5 was pleasing people to challenging people. And that is a really, really good chapter for folks that are new to leadership positions, because when you're new to leadership, it's a real common fallacy to think, well, I got to make the whole team happy. How am I going to make all these people happy? I got 12 people on my team. How am I going to make Bob happy if I'm making Jim happy at the same time? They're 2 different people. And that's what that's about, right? So then you have to start thinking to yourself, what's the best thing for the organization? What's the best thing for the team? How can I add the most value to the most people on the team? And then you got to start evaluating who your producers are, right? And who your liabilities are. And then assign your energies. The amount of value that you put on that into that network is based on production and the good of the organization. And so that's a pretty good one there, right? Next one is maintaining to creating. Maintaining to creating. We talked about that. And that is, some managers take a position at a company with just the goal of maintenance, right? We're just going to keep this thing plodding along. And then there's creating, and creating's different. That's where you're like, man, I took this thing over and I can see this, and this. And I know that, maintaining and establishing these processes is awesome, or it's a necessity, but, I can take this to a whole new level, right? And that's the creating part. And creation's so much fun. I love the creating part of things. Then we did ladder climbing. That was just on Tuesday, right? We talked about ladder climbing to ladder building. First, as a leader, you're going to start out earlier in your career, and you got to figure out how to climb the ladder yourself, right? So you're climbing the ladder, and then you get a certain way up the ladder and you realize, man, I need help. I can't get up this ladder by myself. And then people above you, your mentors, can reach down, kind of hold that ladder for you and kind of pull you up a little bit, right? And then hopefully you get there and you're like, man, I can go further. And then you extend that ladder and you help other people get up that ladder, right? You bring people with you. And then ladder building is when you give people their own ladders so they can go out, climb their own ladders, and then hold the ladder for other people. And, that was a long, long chapter to talk about when you're talking about, an association, a mind picture about a concept, right? Here we are talking about personal leadership, communication, and interaction. But the whole conversation was based on the idea of trying to climb a ladder, right? Well, this one doesn't have too many mind pictures involved, right? Not too many metaphors here. Directing to Connecting is session 8. That's where we're at today. Um, it starts out with a quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower. It says, "You don't lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault, not leadership." That's important. Uh, I can't tell you how many times I've made that mistake. I'll go into a company, I go into a project, I go into a new dealership I'm going to consult with, and immediately, I'm the expert, I'm the authority, and I'm going to show people how this is going to work, right? And then you got people that are resistant, and you're just beating them over the head trying to get them to conform to whatever the new program or process is, and that usually does not have a good result, right? So you don't lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault. It's not leadership, right? So maybe, as I developed my craft and I got better and better at what I did, and better at leading people, I realized I couldn't just go in and start barking, "This is what I do and this is how we're going to do this," right? I couldn't just be like that. I had to be calmer, right? I had to, okay, well, let's really establish something. Let's really ask some questions first. Let's find out where they're really at. Let's find out what they're thinking from their perspective, before we judge. Let's gather some information first. And then let's ease in some changes, right? And then let's get some buy-in and push this thing a little bit further. And wow, I guess that's it. We close the book, go home and have a drink, because I just did the whole chapter just like that, right? No. uh, John opens up chapter 8, and he has that quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower. And while a lot of what I just said is what we're going to discuss, he's got a way of really drawing this out. And that's what I like about John, is he can take a subject, he can draw it out, he can make it crystal clear so that someone at the top of the food chain can understand it, and someone just coming in can understand it. He says he grew up in a home where directing was the practice style of communication and leadership, right? So directing is like, you will do, right? Show of hands. How many of us have been raised in that way? And let me take a look over here on the YouTube side of things. On the YouTube side of things, they've got some emojis. You can pick an emoji, or you can put a comment in if you like, and I'll be able to see those popping up. And I'll go back and forth between the screens and see, how much interaction we're going to get there. But how many of us were raised in an atmosphere like this, right? Do the dishes, vacuum the floor, get up, get down, go here, go there, shut the door, open the door, close the window. Were you raised in a barn, right? And so a lot of us grew up in a practice style of communication and leadership that was directing. And then what John says in his book, and remember, he went through college and then became a pastor, and all that stuff, right? And so he says his college theological training in communication and leadership was reinforced in a directed methodology, right? So he was learning how to be a pastor, and a lot of what they were training him was how to direct, right? How to instruct. And so, and think about it. A lot of our teachers today were brought up in an atmosphere of, this is how you run the classroom, right? This is how you make students do what you need them to do. So a lot of what we're seeing as far as the classroom and the failures from our educational system have a lot to do with the way that people are being taught to share information. And so he says that he did that in college. And then he says in leadership, he realized that the authority in our ecclesiastical world, in our church world, was a top-down type of leadership, right? I mean, you could look at the Catholic Church for that, right? You got the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops, boom, 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 all the way down to your little, neighborhood pastor, right? And so, or priest. And so it says in leadership, the authority in our ecclesiastical world was top down. He says here, "I may not have been Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the 10 commandments to give to the people, but upon occasion I acted like Moses Jr., right?" So he was telling his congregation what they were going to do, what was going to happen, and how things were going to move forward, rather than asking his congregation what their thoughts were and then guiding the conversation in a direction towards growth. Okay. And I got to be really careful how I phrase these things. Sometimes, I go to these new training classes about leadership, and I go as often as I can. I went to one, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when Suzuki had sent me. It was a 10-session course done over 5 different days. 5 different days? Yeah, 5 different days over 10 weeks. And they discussed working with people or managing people, right, from a leadership position, as if everybody were, a snowflake, right? Like they're so delicate, you can't hurt their feelings, and you can't this and you can't that. And it's not, I'm not saying we have to take, a sense of leadership, or, if you're a, man in the military, I'm not asking you to take your manliness or your masculinity out of your job. It's not that, but it's, we've got to give people some vested buy-in, right? We've got to make people feel valued as part of the team. And so there is a nuance to this that you need to weave into what you're doing, right? It says directing others was a very natural leadership style for me, but what's natural for me is not necessarily what's best for others. This is a very similar line that we've read in other chapters, right? He'll say, this is the way I felt that I always should communicate, but then I realized the way I wanted to communicate wasn't what they needed to hear from me, right? So directing others was very natural leadership style for me, but what's natural for me is not necessarily what's best for others. And so in a very quick, one page kind of dissertation here, he covers his childhood, his college life, and his church life as he was directing people. He was raised to direct people. He was taught to direct people, and he executed a directing leadership style at the church level. And he came to realize that wasn't working, right? We're on the page 149 now. I didn't highlight anything on page 149. Here he's just talking about it's a new paradigm for him, right? He has to think of things. And there were two things that drove John to change his mind about directing versus connecting. Okay. One was he hired a business consultant named Bob Beal, right? That was the year I hired Bob Beal as a consultant. At that time, I was leading a large, high-profile church, and my influence was growing nationally and even internationally. I was getting a tremendous number of requests to speak to other organizations and to help them by providing resources. My sense was that I needed to create an organization to handle these requests, and I wanted it to pay for itself, not make it a nonprofit. Okay. So what John's saying here is he wanted to have a way to provide resources and time and speaking and all these things to other organizations. And he didn't want it to just be a nonprofit sucking out of the system. He wanted to be a for-profit, an actual business, right? And so he brings in this business consultant. And this guy just asked him questions for a solid day, right? He says, this was my first experience hiring a business consultant. And it was before I had developed with much experience as a ladder builder, because we talked about ladders in the last session, right? So the way Bob started the process took me totally by surprise. We spent 2 days together, and the entire first day, Bob asked me questions the entire day. He'd ask a question, and I'd answer it, and he'd ask follow-up questions based on my answers. And he worked with flip charts, writing the questions and answers. And at the end of the day, every wall in my office was covered with sheets of paper containing everything that they had talked about. Well, if you're following the series and you were one of my power sports and marine training students, you remember we would talk about a subject and we would drill down and we'd write it on those big pads, and those pads, that selfie stick stuff, we'd stick that on the wall, right? So picture that. Here's John. He's new to the process, right? Guy's asking him a lot of questions. And next thing you know, after a day of talking, he's just got a wall that's just full of paper just hanging there with notes on it, right? And that was how this guy, Bob, drew out the innermost thoughts that John had, the aspirations of what he wanted to achieve, and everything was written on the wall. Then it was a matter of kind of condensing that information into, like almost like a mission statement, right? But like a mission statement, a theory, and then a process. And that's what they did to move forward. It says, I learned an important lesson that day. Bob had to find me, who I was, where I had been, where I hoped to go before he could lead me. Ding, ding, ding. That's what I was talking about at the beginning, right? It's so much better when you read it out of the book and you don't let me make it up, right? Bob had to find me, who I was, where I had been, where I hoped to go before he could lead me. That's what I was saying. If I go earlier in my career, when I would consult with a dealership and going to go, oh, this is all wrong. You should be doing it. This, that, make this happen, hang this on the wall, and I'll see you guys next month, see how you're doing. Right. And I'd go back and there might be one thing out of the 9 suggestions I made that they actually moved forward with. And did it work or did it not work? We're not sure. We didn't really track it. We're not really into it. and I didn't have their buy-in. And I didn't have their buy-in because I didn't understand. I didn't take the time for them to give a crud who I was. And worse, I didn't take the time to give a crud who they were. So it's really hard for me to lead people if I don't know who they are, if I don't know what their motivations are, if I don't know why they chose to do some of the things that they did. And then I come in and go, oh, change all this stuff around, flip it around, and you'll make more money. And they're like, well, who are you? And you don't even care why I do this anyway. So I'm not going to listen. Right. And so it is understanding that helps us to move forward. Um, he says here, and this goes down, it says, bottom of page 150. It's talking about a basketball game, and it's talking about a coach and her players and what they did at the halftime to try and kind of change the direction of the game, right? And so John was lucky enough to go into the locker room at halftime and to see how this was working out. And when he got in there, he was kind of surprised. There was just a board that said, number one, what did we do right in the first half? Number two, what did we do wrong? Number three, what do we need to change? Then the coach didn't even talk to the players. The players ran their own kind of huddle. They discussed the three questions. They analyzed the three questions as a team, and then they made some decisions about how they thought they could move forward. And it says, then Pat walked to the marker on the board, looked at their answers because, the team had written answers on the board. She made a couple of comments related to what they had written, and then she sent the players back out on the floor to warm up for the second half. And after the game, John was stunned, right? So he said, how was that coaching, right? That wasn't like out of the movies where we see the coach come in and make some great monologue and fire up the team and send them out, right? No, she was running a program, letting the team motivate themselves. And she writes, her response to John was, John, too many leaders lead by assumption, she said. They assume they know where their people are. That halftime exercise lets me find my players so I can lead them. That can only be done by asking questions and listening to their answers. Time and time and time again. I remember 2016, I'm in a room with 3,000 people. I'm in Orlando and I'm getting certified as a John Maxwell certified, speaker, coach, trainer, the whole thing. And Christian Simpson is teaching on coaching, and he's trying to get people to teach each other how to juggle. And it was fun. It's a good exercise. So then, just to make a point, he brings somebody up on stage that doesn't know how to juggle. And he says, coaching isn't about telling people what to do. People have the answers inside. They all have the answers inside. Your job as a coach is to ask them the right questions so they can find themselves in their own answer. And then he showed this person how to juggle, not by giving them any instruction at all, but by asking them one question after another, like, hey, could you, are you able to juggle? No. Why do you think you're not able to juggle? And the person said, because when I throw the balls, they fall on the floor. So when you throw the balls and they fall on the floor, what do you think allows the ball to fall on the floor? And he just kept asking questions, and it was hilarious. We thought it was great, but it's one of those things where it was such an eye-opening event for me, because I was watching this and I was like, I don't need to have all the answers. Like when I go to consult with a motorcycle dealership or a marine dealer or, a Fortune 500 executive, if they're struggling with something, I don't need to come in like the authority that has the answers for their industry and teach them how to improve their processes. What I do is I ask them questions and I find out where their real struggles are. And then I help them to find their own answers through their own exercise. And I hope that I say that in a way that makes sense. I hope you track what I just did there. But, I watched in 5 minutes, Christian Simpson show someone how to juggle that didn't know how to juggle without giving them a single instruction, just asking them questions and helping them to figure it out on their own. And that's kind of what John's saying here with this basketball team, right? The coach put the 3 questions up on the board, let the team discuss it, let the team write down what they thought they had to do, then have a discussion afterwards, and then send them back out and execute the game. And that works in true John fashion. I'll show you another thing here. You can see it says directing on one side and connecting on the other. And John loves to do these comparison columns. Someone that is a director is authoritative. It's about talking. It's a top-down organization. Talks about enlisting people. It's very assuming. It gives answers, and it's all about the leader's agenda, right? Someone that is a connected leader. Well, that person's more collaborative. They listen. It's more of a side by side than a top down kind of management thing. They're more empowering, understanding, and they ask questions. And then the agenda isn't the leader's agenda, it's the group's agenda, right? Uh, as I changed my leadership style and I'd move things around a little bit internally with me, um, Suzuki was a great example for me because I had a team of people I actually managed, right? I was in charge. I had to answer to presidents and vice presidents about what my department was doing. But periodically, I would pull the department into one of these private conference rooms, and we would just have like a just a conversation. You know, what are you working on? What do you think is next? How do you guys feel about this? Bam, bam, and it would restructure kind of what I thought was my personal agenda and how I was going to make my mark and really impress the vice presidents, right? I had to go, okay, wait a minute. You know, what I was thinking about impressing the vice presidents with isn't what my team is really motivated to do right now. You know, if we stay active and we stay productive, we can take our energies and go in this direction. And then, you know, it's my job to communicate that upstream, right? Using 360-degree leadership, I need to lead down and lead up, right? And so that's how I kind of manifested that. And so that's the difference between directing and connecting. You know, earlier in my career, when I was like a service manager at a Ford store, I would just be telling people, hey, you're going to do the brakes on that truck next. You're going to do the alignment on that next. You're going to do this next. You know, and I wasn't collaborative back then. I wasn't saying, hey, you know, guys, let's gather up. You know, here's the 15 work orders we got to do today. You know, what do you guys think would be the most efficient way to knock this out today? No, I didn't do it like that. I ran the place, right? And that's a lot of times when we look at managers, we look at corporation setups, we say, you know, the person at the top is directing, they're managing, they're making things happen, you know, they run the place. And those are terms that can be really, really corrosive in what should be more of a collaborative group atmosphere. I'm talking a lot today, so maybe I should come to these things tired more often. Let me check my YouTube screen here just to make sure that we're okay on the YouTube side. All right, looking good. And the bullet points at the bottom of page 151, it says the goal of connecting is to find a common ground with the leader. This is the place where both people meet, both people are valued, both people share, both people listen and learn, both people adjust, both people settle on the game plan. That's important, right? It's part of that setting expectations we talked about like 3 sessions ago. Both people take ownership of the game plan. That's talking about that commitment we talked about in the second session. And then both people move together to higher ground. A little bit of ladder climbing and ladder holding there, right? So you can see how these chapters kind of build upon each other and they rely on each other to build a solid work towards the end of the book. It says, I know I do talk fast. My daughter says I talk fast. So learning to connect is one of the most important things you can ever do in life. And John has a book about that called Winning with People, right? So if you're looking for another John Maxwell book to read, Winning with People is a good one. If you have certain gaps in your development or in your organization and you have questions about what would be a really good next book from John, I have a really good library of John Maxwell books and I've read a bunch of them. So if you want, you can message me directly, tell me what your situation is, what you're looking for, and I'll recommend the John book that I think is, you know, best for your situation. I had already mentioned the 360-degree leader. That's one of my favorites. I really like that one. Then there's Leadership Gold. It's a great series. There's a whole curriculum on Leadership Gold. It's fantastic. And then, you know, this Winning with People, everyone communicates and few connect. It's another great session. And so all of these, like I said, build upon themselves to make a really solid work. It says, making the leader shift to connecting. It says, if you want to become the best leader you're capable of being, you must learn to connect with people. And I've hit that, you know, 7 different ways over the last 7 sessions. But in this chapter, he's talking very specifically about, you know, in order to have that full team conversation, it takes a relational connection. And so he goes over a few different steps on how to make that connection. One is humility. Let people know that you need them, right? He says, When he tells you what he knows, you believe it because he cares about you and hopes it will be helpful. That's the boss that you want to have, and that's the boss that you want to be, right? So humility. You need to have humility. John Wooden was a mentor to John back in the day, as in John Maxwell was mentored by John Wooden. John Wooden was a very, very famous coach, a fantastic leader. And what's interesting about John is so many people have written about him. I've seen so many quotes and things like that. But there's a whole section of this book on page 152 and page 153 where it's an excerpt of somebody writing about John Wooden. And it's really interesting to see, just how many nice things can be said in such a short amount of text. But it says here, when he tells you what he knows, you believe it because he cares about you and hopes it will be helpful. John Wooden always presented the goals of his organization or his team as a goal or a win for you, not for him and the management of the school, but for you. We're going to move over to page 154. And on page 154, John puts in here, humility is essential for connecting with people. It says, it took me a while to learn this. In my younger years, I would ask God to help me to be successful, but secretly I hoped people would think I did it all myself. I possessed more human frailty than humility. And that's important. It takes a really strong person to be able to rely on humility, right? And you have to be able to kind of think of yourself less and less and less as you move forward with more and more people. It's such a backwards kind of math because in the end, you end up with so much more influence. And we had discussed, earlier that, influence, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so by employing humility, you gain more influence, which gives you more leadership and more power. It almost seems like it's a backward situation, but that's the way that works. See you, baby. My daughter was hanging out for a little bit. It says good leaders are aware that they need other people and they let them know that. That's huge. So 2, curiosity. You got to ask questions, right? That's what we started out talking about when we opened up this chapter. And it was about asking good questions, like teaching people how to juggle, right? John puts here at the bottom of 155, says, today I'm in my 70s and I haven't stopped asking questions. I'm still curious and I want to remain that way. Why? Because without asking questions, I can easily become comfortable, stagnant. Entropy can easily settle in. I would start to accept the status quo without asking if there were a better way. I would fail to recognize opportunities. So much is there that resonates with what I have in the Mañana No Mas Academy that right there is a commercial for going in and signing up for any of the courses I have on the Mañana No Mas Academy. Entropy. That's one of the big words they use in the in my course that I've got that is behavioral based goals. Entropy is a big deal. It talks about, entropy as a cause for wanting to have goals, right? To desire growth is to stay away from entropy. Entropy is kind of like where, a lack of organization takes over, right? So you want to avoid entropy. So you don't want entropy to set in. And then he says, I would fail to recognize opportunities. Well, I've got a whole course in the Mañana No Mas Academy. It's capitalizing on opportunities. It's all about how to recognize an opportunity, how to evaluate an opportunity to kind of judge or guess what its worth is, and then how to pursue that opportunity with everything you got. And then, of course, I've got other courses about, measuring key performance indicators and things like that as you set those goals and move forward. It says here, and we're talking into, about curiosity, people that ask questions. It says they assume they have the answers. They value what they think more than what others think. They prioritize directing over understanding others. They don't recognize the need to find common ground. And they don't understand that questions help manage expectations. So who do you think that's talking about there? A director type person or a connected person? If you're on the YouTube live, you could go ahead and click in a comment there or an emoji. If you are not, then if you're watching the replay, I guess you won't be clicking anything for me. But super important there. People that direct, all of those bullets right there apply to them. In order to really connect with people and move to the next level, you have to have a connection. You have to have a relationship. And relationship would erase all of these things. If you had a relationship with the people you led, you wouldn't have to assume the answers. You wouldn't have to devalue what people are thinking, and you wouldn't. It says here they don't understand that questions help manage expectations. If you don't manage the expectations of your team or your audience, then how in the world do you deliver it to them if you have no idea what they expect? If they expect this and you deliver this, you're not going to get anywhere, right? If they expect this and you keep coming in at this, you're going to blow them out of the water, right? You gotta kind of meet people where they're at. That's why I ask people, hey, hit the emojis, give me a comment, let me know what you're thinking, send me some feedback. And that's super important because I want to make sure that I don't, start talking to people, at a level up here when they're still, when they're still trying to figure it out. It says here, I want to take a moment to address this final point, and it's not the end of the chapter. It's only 338. It says, as leaders, we must manage expectations all the time. We have to deal with expectations we have for ourselves, expectations we have for others, and expectations others have for us. Anytime our expectations or those of others don't align with what's actually happening, there are problems. And that's what I just described, right? So you got to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands what the end result should be. Okay. 3, we're up to the third thing, effort. Talk about effort all the time. You got to do the work. You got to do the work. A fantastic idea is just a dream if you don't work on it. It's not a goal, right? A goal without work is a dream. Okay. So effort. Go out of your way to connect with people. He even quotes Oprah Winfrey here. Now, John's kind of a man of faith, right? And he's going to Oprah Winfrey for a quote. So this must be pretty impressive, right? Oprah Winfrey said, the big secret in life is that there is no big secret. Whatever your goal, you can get there if you're willing to work. That is certainly true in connecting with people. You have to make the effort, right? You just got to do it. John goes on and tells a story here about taking his grandson golfing and then trying to get the kid to par on a golf course, and how many days he spent trying to golf with the kid and take a video to share with the family. And when he finally did it, he showed the whole family, made a big deal about it, right? And he says, why would I go through all this? Why would I do all this work, right? This guy's in his 70s, right? So you got a guy in his 70s playing multiple rounds of golf with a kid 40 years his junior, right? And trying to par and making a big deal about, if you can par a hole or not, and then filming it each time until he finally gets it, and then sharing the video with everybody and making a big deal about it, having a big party, right? He says, why did I do that when it was so much work? Well, first of all, it was fun. That's important. When you're really connected to your people, it's not work anymore. It becomes fun. It becomes relational. It becomes the internal drive, right? So that's huge. He says, first of all, it was fun. More importantly, I wanted to make a meaningful memory for my grandson. It's something both of us will always remember, and it created a special connection between us, one that will last well beyond our time on the golf course. John's thinking big picture. He's not thinking of the moment. He's thinking beyond the moment. He wants to create something that his grandson will remember, kind of a legacy of how John was able to communicate with him long after John's going to be gone, right? John's not going to live forever. So it's why we do things. It's why we work so hard for the connection. On page 158, near the end of this section 3 here, it says, every relational connection starts with the decision to make the effort to connect. And that's important because in most situations, you've got the choice, right? You can choose to connect or you can choose to disengage. And life is finite. There's only so many hours in a day. So pick the people that you want to connect with and be strategic about it, okay? It says every relational connection starts with the decision to make the effort to connect. It ends with what I call the mirror test. Can you look in the mirror and say to yourself that you did your best? If so, you've passed the test. As my friend Art Williams said, all you can do is all you can do, but all you can do is enough, right? If I give somebody 100% of what I have to offer, that's my best. If I give people my best, there's nothing to complain about, right? Some might say, "Oh, your best isn't good enough." Well, then they made a bad decision for connection, right? But if I give you my best, there should be no reason for complaint. 4 is trustworthiness. Be someone that others can count on. People do not connect with someone they don't trust. People don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. That's huge. Um, when I talk about my friends in the power sports and the marine industry, and I go to this a lot, right? And I realize that a lot of people watching this might not have any idea what power sports and marine is all about in the service department. But there's a lot of moving parts to that. You know, you got service writers, service managers, service porters, technicians, parts, warranty clerks. I mean, there's just all kinds of working positions within these organizations. And I get a kick out of it. I love watching stuff come in broke and leave fixed. I just think it's a fantastic way to earn a living. But it says here, people don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. And you know, when I'm on these guest podcasts and I'm talking about fixed operations, which is what I train in, and power sports and marine, I know the people in the industry can hear my language, they can see the look in my eye, they understand the passion, and they go, "He gets it. That guy gets it." Like, if I want my people to learn from somebody, I want my people to learn from that guy, because he gets it. He understands it. He's driven by it. And I can see why he's doing what he does. If I was just some kind of numbers and spreadsheets kind of guy that said, "Well, you guys did 400 hours in labor last month. Let's see if we can do 430 hours of labor this month." You know, if I was just kind of drawing things out and trying to push things on a spreadsheet, that'd be a whole lot different than being involved with the people and being involved in the processes, asking them questions. Why do you do it this way? Why do you do it that way? You know, why is your building configured this way with this equipment? You know, what was your thought on this flow? You know, figure all that out and I go, okay, you know, what things do you think we could tweak here to try and speed the process up for you? Or what things do you think we could change about this process to make your technicians work smoother and faster and be happier in the process? And when you draw it out that way, it works out for the better of everybody, right? Looks good for me because they're going to do better, make more money, which makes the investment in my training look like a really great decision. But it works out great for them too, because they get to have a vested interest in what they're improving, what they're changing, and they understand why they're changing it, and they're moving forward gracefully. And it's really awesome to watch happen, right? That's what leadership is supposed to look like. It says, as a leader, I know I have to keep my motives right. If my primary motivation is to add value to help them, then all is good. If not, I'll get off track. And you know, things that keep him on track is, there's 3 things. It says integrity in my life, consistency in my actions, and competence in my work. That's huge. You know, I mentioned last session, I said sometimes you got to jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Famous saying in the John Maxwell group, right? Sometimes a corporate client will ask you to consult in a situation where you may or may not be the expert. And you know, and you want the job, you want the contract, and you're like, you know what, yeah, we can do that, and you're like, well, now I got to figure this out. That doesn't mean you're incompetent. That means you got something to figure out, right? But you're competent because you can figure it out. Integrity in my life, consistency in my actions, competence in my work, right? And that competence creates a confidence that allows you to communicate with people in a really sure, definite way, right? It says, I do fail sometimes. And how do I regain lost trust? So we talked about, you have to be trustworthy. People have to want to follow you. You know, you have to have integrity. You have to be consistent. You have to be competent. But sometimes you're going to drop the ball. When that ball gets dropped, how do you regain the trust of someone you've lost trust with? First off, I want to say it's not easy. It's not easy. You got to be hat in hand. You got to put your pride down. You got to leverage that humility thing we talked about at the beginning, right? Then it says, I fully acknowledge what I've done wrong. I explain exactly what I'm doing, what I'm going to do to try to make things right. right? I explain exactly what I'm going to do to try and make things right. I give them an opportunity to share their perspective and add anything to what I shared with them. I do the work to fix the problem, and I follow up with them to confirm the problem was fixed. That is specifically what I've told folks to do in a service industry about conflict resolution with customers. You know, if let's say you have a beautiful Ford Mustang, custom wheels, the whole thing, and you take it into the dealership because you want new tires put on, and a kid scratches one of the wheels. Well, you don't put like magic marker on the scratch and then hope that the customer doesn't see it, right? No. You're like, hey, bad news. You know, we're working in a hurry. We're trying to get your car done. We scratched a wheel. We want to do what's right. This is what we're doing to make things right. This is does this meet your expectations? You know, and then when you get it done, you put the new wheels on or you get the wheel fixed or whatever. You call the customer back and you say, your car is ready. The wheel is fixed. Is there anything else that we can do to help you? Did we meet your expectations? Even though this was a mistake, even though we dropped the ball and, you know, created this uncomfortable situation, did we, you know, make good on our end and make it right? And you got to get that confirmation from the customer. It's the same process here, right? Page 160, generosity says, give first and give continually. And this goes back to perks to price, right? It says a person first starts to live when he can live outside of himself. That's Albert Einstein. So again, Albert Einstein says a person first starts to live when he can live outside of himself. There was a theologian named Henry Nguyen, and that says, when we refrain from giving with a scarcity mentality, the little we have becomes less, right? When we give generously with an abundance mentality, what we give will always multiply. When you get into terms like giving and multiplication and scarcity versus abundance, and you have these conversations, I want to be careful because I don't want to be I don't want to be a Joel Osteen. I don't want to, be a Benny Hinn kind of guy. Oh, send me a check and you'll win the lottery. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But when you give generously and you have a good heart about giving and you don't regret the giving, it's amazing to see the fruits of that giving unfold over time, right? It's a really cool reward. And that's what they're kind of talking about here for you. Whew. It says giving isn't about the receiver or the gift, but the giver. It's for the giver. One doesn't open one's wallet to improve the world, although it's nice when that happens. One opens one's wallet to improve oneself. Who do you think said that? They were giving a speech at a school. So this is a quote from a speech. And it's from 2001. It was to the graduating class at Vassar College. And it says, should you give away what you have? Of course you should. I want you to consider making your lives one long gift to others. And why not? All the other stuff you have is just on loan. All you want to get at the getting place, from the Maserati you may dream about to the retirement fund some guy will try to sell you on sooner or later, none of that is real. All that lasts in this world is what you pass on. The rest is smoke and mirrors. And then the quote, giving isn't about the receiver or the gift, but the giver. It's for the giver. One doesn't open one's wallet to improve the world, although it's nice when that happens. One opens one's wallet to improve one's self. Stephen King. So Stephen King had that quote. I thought that was interesting because I know him as a guy writing all these horror books, right? 6, listening. Open the best door to connecting with people. Listen. All that stuff about asking the questions, right? All that stuff about finding out what's inside the other person. That's all part of the connection process. And one of the keys is that you listen after you ask the question. Listen to the answer. It says, there's a story that goes with it. It's kind of funny. It says, I once read a story about a tennis pro who was giving a lesson to a new student. After watching the student take several swings at the tennis ball, the instructor began to suggest ways the man might improve his stroke. But every time the instructor made a suggestion, the student interrupted him with his own diagnosis of the problem and how he might fix it. After being interrupted yet again, the pro simply nodded in agreement and let the player continue on his own. When the lesson was over, a woman who observed the lesson was familiar with the pro and had seen the whole thing. And she asked, "Why did you go along with the arrogant man's stupid suggestions?" And the old pro smiled and said, "I learned a long time ago that it's a sheer waste of time to try and sell answers to a person that only wants to buy echoes." Now, I have had this happen to me personally in the workplace. I want to explain how this happens. I was the team leader and I had someone on my team that was completely new at something. And this particular person would come up with an idea. And it was always something off the cuff. It was never, I'm always up for new, I'm always up for new processes. I'm always up for new adventures. I'm always up for ideas on how to improve things. But this particular person would always come up with stuff that was kind of like really left field, right? Like really outside the way that things were done. And so, he would come up with something, and then I would say, "Well, for now, let's do it this way. This is what we've got in place. This is what the team does. This is the organization. This is how, for us to allow you to do it your way, we would have to affect the workflow of 5 other people. And so for now, I need you to continue to execute on this path until we have a breaking point somewhere else where the rest of the team could make a shift in direction as well. And maybe we can try it then." So basically, I would say no. It's my job, right? Sometimes you got to say no. But this person would say that they wanted to know how to do it. They would say, "Well, then how do you do it?" And then you would say, "Well, this is how you do it." And he goes, "But I think I should do it this way." "Well, this is how you need to do it. I think I should do it this way." And then they wouldn't just take the guidance from the team leader. They would go around the rest of the building into different departments, and they would have lengthy conversations with people until someone finally told them what they wanted to hear. All it took was anybody in the building would go, "Oh, dude, what you just said sounds like a really good idea. We should try that sometime." And they would go, "I knew it. I knew I should have done it that way." And then he would disappear and he would do it his way and screw up the whole process for the next week or two before you really knew that things had gotten out of control, right? And think about that. When you have 5, 6 people on a team and everybody's working in unison to go in a direction, and one person insists on going another way, what does that do to the other 5 people? It takes everybody out of step, right? It takes everybody out of kilter, and it's a disruption. And a lot of times I would say that disruption equals opportunity, right? Like find the opportunity in the disruptions, but there's times where it's just out of place, and it just, you really got to watch that. And so where he says here, "I learned long ago that it's a sheer waste of time to try to sell answers to a person who only wants to buy echoes." When you are in a leadership position and you are faced with this, I will tell you firsthand, you can try that once or twice, 3 strikes, you're out. It's time to start looking for a replacement, right? If you allow yourself to get stuck in this space where this is constantly happening, where you have a member on your team that's looking for an echo rather than a direction, then because you got to remember, this book is about this section is about connecting, not directing, right? But if you are unable to sway that person through connection to conform and work with the rest of the team, well, then you don't have a connection either. So in this situation, you're not directing or connecting. You're doing nothing. And so it's better off to actually cut your losses at that point. So bottom of 163, he says he made a list of the negatives of not listening well. Says, few people had anything to share with me. My leadership was based on assumption. My ideas were only ideas being implemented. Nobody was taking ownership of the tasks except for himself, and my team lacked connection. This is what John experienced through poor leadership, through poor connection, right? When he led from a directing standpoint, basically he would tell people what to do and they might get it done, but he wasn't able to really move forward with the team. He could see that wasn't what was happening. And so he looked at what he was doing himself and he made some changes. And in the book on 164, you can see where I basically just highlighted the tops of each of these paragraphs, and I'll go through them quickly based on time. says he reminded himself daily to listen well. He stopped interrupting people. When you interrupt somebody, you are not just voicing your opinion, right? You're not having an equitable contribution to the conversation. When you interrupt somebody, you are asserting that what you have to say is more important than what they are already saying. And so you have to understand when you communicate in that way, that's a very negative framework, right? So stop interrupting. He started asking questions. He found that one of the best ways to invite the other person to talk, right? If they slow down on their sharing, ask questions and they'll share more, right? And then he invited people to hold him accountable to listen. uh, Section 7 says, encouragement, give people oxygen for their soul. And then there's a whole section here about Abe Lincoln on page 165 and 166 about how Abe Lincoln would even have to keep things on his person to remind himself that he was somebody of worth, somebody of value. Even as the president of the United States, he was like, I got to keep this newspaper clipping with me to remind me that I got my act together, right? It says, when you interact with others as a leader, what is your mindset? Is your intention to correct them or connect with them? I'm always envious of people that are able to put words together like that. It says, when you interact with others as a leader, what is your mindset? Is your intention to correct them or connect with them? It's pretty interesting, right? Am I always trying to connect? Am I always trying to correct people and change their trajectory? Or am I just trying to make a connection? All right, that's interesting. It says here, there's a nice little story about J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And so if you're a fan of either one of those writers, it would be interesting to know that they were friends, they were buddies. And there were times where Tolkien wanted to quit. There were times where Tolkien wasn't feeling encouraged enough to continue. And it was actually C.S. Lewis that encouraged him to keep pushing, to keep forging forward. And that's, why you have books like The Hobbit and things like that. So that's pretty cool. It says everyone in your life can use encouragement that only you can give. That to me is that resonates hard. There are times where I feel inspired to say something nice to somebody, or I feel that I should congratulate somebody for something, and for some reason, embarrassment, maybe, shy. I'm not that shy, but I keep to myself. And then later I regret it because I realize in that moment, I might have been the one person that individual needed to hear from, right? I could have been the guy that was like, hey, great talk. You did a wonderful job here, blah, blah, blah. Anything I can do for you, let me know. You just want to be nice to folks. And times I find myself going, nah, they don't need that input from me. They don't need that from me. Who am I to tell this person I appreciate what they're doing, right? And the truth is that person probably could use that uplifting word of encouragement. And in a lot of cases, you're the only person that could really hit that person in that way, right? That could really make a difference for that person. So always remember, when you feel inspired to give somebody a nudge, give that person a nudge, okay? At the bottom of 167, I highlighted this little paragraph here, and it felt more like speaking advice to me, right? Because like I said, I'm a public speaker. So this felt more like speaking coaching to me. But it says, I also take the mind of an encourager onto the stage when I speak. As a communicator, I can either try to be the sage on the stage or the guide by their side. See that whole play on words thing? I wish I could do that better. A sage looks down on others and tries to impress them with wisdom. A guide comes alongside, shares the journey, and encourages them to go the distance with him. I don't want to impress others. I want to connect with them and help them. That's huge. Remember last session, I would say, I would see John speak. The first couple of times I saw him, I was like, that's corny. But then now I've come to expect it, where he opens up and he goes, hi, I'm John Maxwell. I'm your friend. Right? No, he doesn't say Maxwell. He says, I'm John. Hey, I'm John. I'm your friend. And you're just like, that's weird. And then third time, fourth time, fifth time, you're like, that's my buddy John. There's my buddy John. And he's made that connection with me through that way, right? That's important. You could be the sage from the stage. You could, point your finger and tell everybody how smart you are. But at the end of the day, what kind of impression did you really make, right? Whereas if you can come alongside people and bolster them, how much better is that? And folks, it is 4:02. We started a few minutes late because of the Facebook snafus. So we're at the hour mark and we are done another session. There are 12 sessions to this. So we have 9, 10, 11, and 12 to go. So 4 more sessions. Looks like it would be April 23rd that we'll be finishing this up. And I just want to thank you guys again, the ones that are forging forward and sticking it out and joining me on Tuesdays and Thursdays or watching the replays. And I've had some good feedback on this. And I got to tell you, it warms my heart. It makes me feel good that, yeah, it takes effort. You know, like I said before, when you read a book for yourself, that's one thing. When you read a book knowing you want to explain it to others, that's a whole nother level. And I appreciate this exercise because this book was really jumping off the pages to me during the COVID crisis. I'm like, leadership, quick action, be a person of action, you know, bring people with you, lead people, right? Like be an inspiration to others to be leaders. I mean, these are all the things that jumped off at me during the COVID crisis when it was breaking out. And now here we are 2 months into this, you know, because it's April and we're what, a month into the book. And I just feel like it's the right message at the right time. And I'm so happy that you were able to join us. As I do, I would like to pray for us at the end of this. And so I give people a chance or a moment to sign out. If that's not their thing, I don't want to beat you over the head and force you down my path of faith if it's not for you. But for those that are in faith or those that are curious about faith, if you would like to stick around for prayer for a minute, that'd be fantastic. I'd love to have you. All right. You guys ready? We'll close out in prayer, and then I'll wish you guys the best of weekends, and I'll see you next Tuesday at 3 o'clock so we can do session 9. Okay. Father God, I thank you so much for the time that people give, for the time that people spend, Father, for the commitment that they make. Father, leadership is a weaved thing. It is not something that people are born with. In a lot of cases, it is counterintuitive. Father, even people that are natural born leaders still have a lot of nuances to learn. And Father, I thank you so much for making us a complicated being, for making us so unique and so different in each and every way. Father, thank you for wiring some to lead. Father, for wiring some to follow. And Father, I do thank you so much for the gift of wisdom that you have at least lent to me for a short time to be able to share with others. Father, I thank you for technology. I thank you that even during the COVID crisis, we've got a way to communicate, a way to connect. Father, I thank you that the food has, that the store has food. I thank you that I can run down and buy a gallon of milk. You know, at the beginning of all this, there were some uneasy moments. And Father, I thank you that you've just allowed not peace, but you've allowed a sense of consistency to fall into most of us here, at least in our country, and the people that I have direct communication with. Father, I thank you so much for the people that have reached out to Mañana No Mas. Gosh, we've got Brussels, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Taiwan, Australia, Hawaii, Alaska, Canada. Goodness, Father, I thank you so much that the world, as big as it is, as big as you've made it, can seem so small when people can connect through a keyboard. Father, I ask that you would bless the people listening. I bless that you would take into account all the prayers that are unmentioned or muffled under their breath as I speak right now. And Father, that you would give us all just a sense of peace over this Easter weekend. Father, we thank you for the gift of your Son, for our salvation. And it's going to be different watching church on a screen, especially during Easter. But Father, I do pray, I hope, my desire is that we would have the courage to invite others to join in online. This could be the easiest time for a non-believer or a curious believer or a seeker, Father, to find your word and to find about your gift of your Son and the selflessness it took as you gave him to us for our salvation on Easter. They don't even have to get dressed, Father. They can just sit there in their underwear and watch church. So it might not be the way I want it. Like John says in the book, maybe the way I want it isn't what the other people need, and that's okay. Father, I love you, and I thank you for your son, and in your son's name we pray. Amen. Well, folks, it is Easter weekend. There's a lot going on. I pray that whatever your belief system is, wherever you're at, I pray that you find peace, that you find consistency, that you find a sense of calmness in this moment, and you have a moment to reflect. I've been so busy with the COVID crisis. I feel like I've been so busy and getting so much work done, but I also have had the moments to sit with family, to have a fire in the fire pit, to have an adult beverage with my wife. There's been a lot of pluses to this, and I pray that you're in a position where you can see some of the silver lining in this cloud too. And well, I'll see you guys for session 9. Have a great day and enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye.